As Hardy walked onto the stage, the audience erupted in applause. He settled into the guest chair with his characteristic reserved demeanor, adjusting his leather jacket as Kimmel began his opening remarks. The British actor appeared relaxed, even cracking a slight smile as he acknowledged the crowd's enthusiasm. "So, Tom, great to have you back on the show," Kimmel began, immediately launching into his prepared material without giving Hardy a chance to properly respond. "I have to ask about your latest role because, frankly, I'm not sure I understand what's happening in half your movies. Do you even know what's going on when you're filming them?" Hardy's expression shifted slightly, his jaw tightening as he processed the backhanded comment disguised as humor. "Well, Jimmy, I think audiences are smart enough to follow complex narratives. Maybe the issue isn't with the films themselves." Kimmel chuckled, but there was an edge to it. Right. So you're saying I'm not smart enough to get your movies?" He turned to the audience, seeking their laughter. "Guys, Tom Hardy thinks I'm stupid." The audience laughed, but Hardy's posture stiffened. "That's not what I said at all. I said audiences are intelligent, which includes everyone here tonight." Sure. Kimmel waved dismissively, already moving to his next prepared joke. "Speaking of intelligence, I heard you once got into character so deeply for a role that you stayed in character for months afterward. Is that true, or is that just another one of those Hollywood myths?" Hardy leaned forward slightly. "Method acting is a legitimate technique that many actors use to deliver authentic performances. It's not a myth, it's a craft." "A craft?" Kimmel repeated mockingly. "So when you were playing Bane, did you walk around talking like that all the time? Did you order coffee like that?" He proceeded to do an exaggerated, offensive imitation of Hardy's Bane voice. "I'll have a venti latte." "For you!" The audience laughed, but Hardy's eyes narrowed. That's not how method acting works, Jimmy. And frankly, reducing serious preparation to a punchline is pretty dismissive of the work that goes into these performances." Kimmel seemed oblivious to Hardy's growing irritation. "Oh, come on, Tom, lightens up. It's just a joke. You Brits are always so serious about everything. Can't you take a little ribbing?" "I can take ribbing when it's clever," Hardy replied, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet tone that anyone familiar with his work would recognize as a warning sign. "But what you're doing isn't ribbing. It's lazy." The studio fell silent. For a moment, the weight of Hardy's words hanging in the air. Kimmel's smile faltered briefly before he forced it back, clearly unprepared for pushback from his guest. "Lazy?" Kimmel laughed nervously. "Well, that's a first. Usually my guests appreciate my humor." "Your humor," Hardy repeated slowly, as if tasting something unpleasant. "Is that what we're calling this?" The tension in the studio was palpable now, with audience members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Kimmel, perhaps sensing he was losing control of the interview, decided to double down rather than course correct. "You know what, Tom? Maybe you should stick to grunting and wearing masks in movies, because conversation clearly isn't your strong suit." Hardy's hands gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles whitening. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing the moment when his legendary composure began to crack. What happened next would become the defining moment of the interview, setting off a chain of events that would reverberate through social media and entertainment news for weeks to come. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before. Hardy slowly released his grip on the chair and leaned back, his eyes never leaving Kimmel's face. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a cold precision that made everyone in the studio hold their breath. "You know what, Jimmy? I've sat through a lot of interviews in my career. Some good, some bad, some forgettable. But this," he gestured around the set with deliberate slowness, "this is something else entirely." Kimmel's nervous laughter echoed through the studio. "Come on, Tom, we're just having fun here. Don't take everything so seriously." "Fun?" Hardy's eyebrow arched dangerously. "Is that what you call disrespecting your guests? Making jokes at their expense while they're sitting right next to you? Tell me, Jimmy, how many actors have you driven away with this routine?" The host's face flushed red as he realized Hardy wasn't backing down. Look, if you can't handle a little comedy, maybe late-night television isn't for you. Comedy, Hardy repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. He turned slightly toward the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what passes for entertainment these days. A host who thinks belittling his guests is comedy gold. Kimmel's producer frantically gestured from the wings, trying to signal for a commercial break, but Kimmel waved him off, his ego now fully engaged in the confrontation. You know what your problem is, Hardy? You're too uptight. You take yourself way too seriously. It's just television, man. Relax. Hardy stood up slowly, his imposing frame casting a shadow over Kimmel's desk. The audience gasped audibly. Relax? You want me to relax while you insult my profession, mock my work, and treat me like I'm here for your amusement? Sit down, Tom, Kimmel said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. We're in the middle of a show here. No, Hardy said firmly. We're in the middle of a train wreck, and you're the conductor. He turned to face the audience directly. This man invited me here tonight supposedly to discuss my work, but instead he spent the entire time trying to make me the punchline of his jokes. The cameras continued rolling as Kimmel desperately tried to regain control. Tom, please, just sit down and we'll move on to the next segment. Hardy laughed, but there was no humor in it. Move on? To what? More jokes about my accent? More mockery of method acting? More cheap shots designed to get laughs at my expense? He shook his head. I don't think so. This is live television, Kimmel protested, his voice rising in pitch. You can't just stand there and lecture me. I'm not lecturing you, Jimmy. I'm educating you. There's a difference between comedy and cruelty, between wit and disrespect. What you've been doing tonight isn't funny. It's pathetic. The studio fell into stunned silence as Hardy's words hit their mark. Kimmel's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, like a fish gasping for air. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to applaud or remain silent. You want to know what's really funny? Hardy continued, his voice gaining momentum. A grown man who makes millions of dollars to talk to people for a living, and he can't manage to do it with basic human decency. Kimmel finally found his voice, but it came out as a desperate squeak. Security! Hardy raised his hands peacefully. Don't worry, Jimmy. I'm not going to touch you. I wouldn't want to give you material for tomorrow night's monologue. His eyes swept across the studio one final time. But I am done pretending this is acceptable. The tension reached a breaking point as Hardy took a step toward Kimmel's desk, his presence commanding the entire studio's attention. Kimmel instinctively rolled his chair backward, the wheels squeaking against the studio floor. Tom, please, let's just calm down here. Calm down? Hardy's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than any shout. I am calm, Jimmy. This is me being perfectly calm. He placed both hands on Kimmel's desk, leaning forward slightly. What you're seeing is controlled disappointment. The studio audience was completely silent now, phones out and recording despite studio policies. Several producers had emerged from the wings, unsure whether to intervene or let the moment play out for the cameras. You know what I find fascinating? Hardy continued, his gaze boring into Kimmel's increasingly pale face. You spend your entire career making jokes about other people, but the moment someone calls you out, you crumble. Where's that famous wit? Now? Kimmel's hands trembled as he shuffled his note cards. I was just trying to keep things light. It's entertainment, Tom. Entertainment for whom? Hardy's question hung in the air like a challenge. Because I'll tell you what's entertaining. Me right now. Watching you realize that not everyone is going to sit there and take your garbage with a smile. The host's voice cracked as he tried to respond. Look, if I offended you, I apologize, but this is getting out of hand. Oh, now you apologize? Hardy straightened up, his full height making Kimmel look even smaller behind his desk. After spending 20 minutes trying to humiliate me on national television? That's not an apology, Jimmy. That's damage control. From somewhere in the audience, a voice called out, "Let him talk." Others began to murmur agreement, the crowd clearly siding with Hardy despite being at Kimmel's show. Kimmel's face flushed, deeper red. "This is my show," he snapped, his composure finally cracking completely. "My name is on the building. You don't get to come in here and lecture me." Hardy smiled for the first time all evening, but it was predatory. There it is. The real Jimmy Kimmel. Not the folksy everyman character you play for the cameras, but the entitled bully who thinks his name on a building gives him the right to treat people like dirt. "I am not a bully," Kimmel shouted, standing up abruptly. "I'm a comedian. This is what I do?" "No," Hardy said, his voice cutting through Kimmel's protest like a blade. "What you do is hide behind the word comedian to justify being cruel. Real comedians punch up, not down. They find humor in situations, not in destroying people's dignity." The two men now stood facing each other across the desk, the height difference making the confrontation even more dramatic. Cameras zoomed in, from multiple angles, capturing every micro-expression. "You want to know what's really pathetic?" Hardy continued relentlessly. "I've worked with actual tough guys, gangsters for research, military personnel, real dangerous people, and not one of them felt the need to prove themselves by tearing others down for laughs." Kimmel's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. You're threatening me on live television." "I'm not threatening you, Jimmy. I'm diagnosing you." Hardy's voice remained eerily calm. "You're a small man who found a way to make millions by making other people feel smaller. But tonight, that stops working." The studio fell into absolute silence except for the hum of cameras and equipment. Even the producers had stopped gesturing, transfixed by the psychological dismantling taking place before their eyes. Hardy reached into his jacket pocket, causing several security guards to tense up, but he only pulled out his phone. "You know what's going to happen now? I'm going to walk out of here, and by tomorrow morning, this entire exchange will be everywhere. Social media, entertainment news, talk show roundups. Everyone will see exactly who you really are." "You can't do this to me," Kimmel whispered. His bravado completely evaporated. "I'm not doing anything to you," Hardy replied, stepping back from the desk. "You did this to yourself the moment you decided respect was optional." He looked directly into the main camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Jimmy Kimmel Live, where apparently guests are brought on to be humiliated for your entertainment." The actor turned toward the exit, but Kimmel's voice stopped him one final time. "Tom, please, don't leave like this. We can fix this." Hardy paused at the edge of the stage, his back still to Kimmel. For a moment, the entire studio held its breath, waiting to see if the actor would turn around, if there might be some last-minute reconciliation that could salvage the disaster unfolding on live television. But when Hardy slowly turned to face Kimmel one final time, there was no forgiveness in his eyes. "Fix this?" Hardy's voice carried across the silent studio with devastating clarity. "Jimmy, you can't fix 20 years of being who you are with a single conversation. This isn't a moment of poor judgment. This is your pattern." Kimmel's shoulders sagged as if Hardy's words were physical blows. "Please, Tom. My career—" "Your career?" Hardy let out a laugh that was devoid of any warmth. "What about the careers of every guest you've humiliated? What about the actors who've sat in that chair and smiled while you mocked their life's work? Did you think about their careers?" The cameras continued to roll as Hardy walked back toward center stage. But this time his movement was deliberate, calculated. He wasn't approaching Kimmel in anger. He was delivering a eulogy. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy? You actually had talent once. I've seen your old work. But somewhere along the way, you decided that being cruel was easier than being clever, That punching down got bigger laughs than punching up. Members of the audience began to stand and applaud, a slow clap that built into thunderous approval. Hardy raised his hand to quiet them, his command of the room now absolute. "But here's what you need to understand," he continued, his voice rising above the applause. "Entertainment built on humiliation isn't entertainment. It's exploitation. And tonight, that stops." Kimmel tried one last desperate attempt to regain control. "Security! Get him off my stage!" But the security guards remained frozen, unsure of their role in this unprecedented situation. Hardy noticed their hesitation and smiled grimly. "They're not moving, Jimmy. You know why? Because even they can see what's happening here. Even they know who the real problem is in this room." Hardy walked to the guest chair and picked up the microphone he'd been given at the start of the interview. He looked at it for a moment, then set it carefully on Kimmel's desk. "I won't be needing this anymore. But you will. You'll need every microphone you can get to try to explain this away tomorrow." He straightened his jacket with deliberate precision. "Good luck with that." The actor turned to address the studio audience directly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just shifted the balance of power in live television. "Ladies and gentlemen, you came here tonight expecting entertainment. Instead, you witnessed something much more valuable: accountability. Remember this moment. Remember that you don't have to accept disrespect disguised as humor." As Hardy walked toward the exit, audience members began to stand, some calling out, "Support," others simply watching in stunned admiration. The sound of their approval followed him across the stage. Kimmel made one final pathetic attempt to salvage the situation. "Tom? Tom, come back! We're not done here!" Hardy stopped at the stage door and turned back one last time, his voice carrying clearly across the silent studio. "Yes, Jimmy, we are done. Completely done." With that, Tom Hardy walked off the stage and out of the studio, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been Jimmy Kimmel's controlled environment. The cameras remained fixed on Kimmel, who sat slumped behind his desk, the color drained from his face. The audience continued to buzz with excitement and shock, many still recording with their phones despite repeated requests from staff to put them away. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation would begin spreading across social media platforms. Kimmel looked directly into the main camera, his usual confidence completely shattered. We'll be right back after these messages," he managed to say, but his voice was barely a whisper. As the show cut to commercial, the damage was already spreading beyond the studio walls. Social media exploded with clips of Hardy's takedown, with hashtags like "Why Tom Hardy Truth" and "Kimmel Exposed" trending within the hour. Entertainment reporters who had been watching live immediately began crafting stories about the most dramatic guest walkout in talk show history. The confrontation marked a turning point not just for Kimmel's show, but for late-night television itself. Viewers had witnessed what happened when someone refused to play along with the game of televised humiliation, and they clearly approved. Hardy's methodical dismantling of Kimmel's persona had exposed the hollow cruelty at the heart of much modern's comedy. By the next morning, clips of the confrontation had been viewed millions of times, with overwhelming support for Hardy's stance. The actor had walked away from the chaos he'd created, but his message resonated far beyond that studio. Respect isn't negotiable, and entertainers who built their careers on the degradation of others would no longer go unchallenged. The incident became a defining moment in entertainment history, proving that sometimes the most powerful thing a guest can do is simply refuse to be the punchline.